On Christmas night, a door closed in Deborah's face and the truth finally stepped into the light. A sister's smirk, a husband's glittered cuff, a text that said the door was open in 10 minutes. What came next was not a scene, it was a plan. Ledgers, receipts, and a courtroom where paper speaks louder than charm. If stories of betrayal, consequences, and taking your life back keep you watching, you are in the right place. This is Cheating Stories 7. Tap like, subscribe, and tell me what you would have done at that door. Now, let's step into tonight's story. Caught cheating at Christmas, I took everything back. Newport's wind pressed hard against Deborah's coat as she climbed the stone steps, one arm wrapped around a stack of gifts, the other clutching a tin of ginger cookies she had baked after midnight. She rehearsed the first line she would say to her mother, softened the tone for her father, even practiced a smile for her sister as a peace offering. Through the frosted glass, she saw chandeliers blooming with light, cousins drifting past in red and green, a pianist easing carols into the air. She knocked, already hearing the welcome in her head. It never came. The door opened halfway. Lauren stood in a velvet dress the color of burgundy wine, her mouth tilted in a smirk so faint it could pass for politeness to a stranger. Behind her, their mother hovered, chin lifted, eyes narrowed in that familiar way reserved for things that disappointed her but could not be thrown away. Lauren didn't move. She didn't reach for the gifts. She let the cold slip around Deborah's ankles and said softly, like it was courtesy, "This is no place for losers." The words slid into Deborah's chest and sat there, heavy and bright. Deborah's fingers tightened on the cookie tin. Behind Lauren, her husband stood in the entry hall, straightening his tie as if the knot mattered more than his wife on the doorstep. Evan looked at her, then through her, then down. The smallest motion, the loudest answer. Humiliation rose, then froze into clarity. If this was a game, someone had been practicing while she was at work. Lauren's perfume drifted outward, expensive and unfamiliar. The velvet dress, the diamond glint at her wrist, the shoes untouched by debt. Deborah remembered every late-night spreadsheet, every wire transfer, every rationalization she had fed herself to make generosity feel like control. She drew a breath and asked a neutral question, because neutrality sometimes buys time. "Is there a reason?" Her mother's mouth twitched. "Not tonight, Debbie. Your timing is difficult." The word hung there, precise and cruel. Inside the house, laughter rose, rehearsed and sharp. Deborah studied details as if scanning a ledger. Lauren's freshly painted nails, her phone flashing with a covered message, Evan's cuff flecked with glitter she did not own. The pianist restarted a carol, trying to erase a mistake. For a moment, she considered bending, apologizing for a thing she had not done. Old reflex. But the sentence, "no place for losers," had already clicked a lock inside her. She felt the night divide into before and after, the hinge being this threshold where her family chose spectacle over mercy. She placed the cookie tin gently on the step, rebalanced the gifts, and straightened. "I won't force myself in," she said, her voice steady though it was built on broken glass. Lauren's brows lifted. Their mother exhaled, relieved the rule had been followed. Evan drifted farther back, pretending to listen to a cousin, pretending not to see his wife left outside. His eyes slid past her, checking for lint in a mirror that wasn't there. Shame pooled beneath Deborah's ribs and then receded, leaving only attention. Attention to the diamond bracelet, the text message, the barricade of her mother's hand. The facts balanced into a picture you could only see from the cold. Deborah nodded once, as if a meeting had ended. "Merry Christmas," she said, her voice clean and calm. She turned, careful not to let the wind snatch the wrapping paper, and walked back into the dark that smelled of snow and salt. On the sidewalk, she paused. She set the gifts on the low wall and took out her phone, not to plead, not to apologize. She wrote down 3 things she would do tomorrow when the light made everything uglier and easier to classify. She ended each with a period, not an exclamation point. Endings, properly made, require them. Behind her, the door clicked shut with the soft finality of a vault. In the window, a Christmas tree burned with the stubbornness of memory. She slid her phone back into her pocket, lifted the gifts, and walked toward the car. The streetlights drew long bars across the snow. A church bell turned the hour. One thought arranged itself, clear and sharp. If there is no place for losers, then there is also no shelter for liars. The sentence fit. It warmed her like a small flame cupped in both hands. Deborah did not leave the street. Instead, she circled the mansion and found the side entrance she had once used as a teenager. The latch remembered her hand. Warmth struck her first, then the perfume of roasted rosemary and sugared citrus, then the bright clatter of a party intent on performing joy. She smoothed her coat, squared her shoulders, and stepped into the light as if she had been invited all along. The dining room glowed. Crystal stemware scattered chandeliers into constellations across the table. A cousin told a story that ended in laughter, half a beat too late to be genuine. Deborah smiled, nodding at faces that pretended not to be surprised by her sudden presence. Lauren commanded a semicircle near the tree, her diamond bracelet throwing sparks from every angle. Months earlier, she had begged Deborah for money at midnight, claiming she was on the verge of losing the boutique. Tonight, the rent sparkled in diamonds. At the sideboard, Evan poured himself wine with the delicacy of a man who thought glass, not truth, was fragile. He did not greet her. He did not close the distance between them. He behaved as though erasing a few steps could erase the widening canyon of betrayal. Deborah told herself to wait, to observe, to let the players fall into their roles. When performance relaxes, reality appears. Lauren's laugh rose, bright as a bell. The handbag at her chair was the same model she had once claimed she could never afford without just one more bridge loan. Deborah felt the tug of old enabling, then let it pass. She had changed the script on the steps outside. Now she would follow it. A vibration hummed on the walnut sideboard. Reflex made Deborah glance. Evan's phone lay face-up beside the corkscrew. A message bloomed across the screen, short and exact. Doors open, 10 minutes. The sender's name was nothing but a single initial, but the intimacy lived in the grammar. No greeting, no please, no wasted punctuation. The phone lit Evan's knuckles a beat before he reached it. Too late. Deborah was already watching. He turned the phone over, glass to wood. His mouth shaped something that could have been later, or sorry, or nothing at all. Deborah lifted her glass and gave him a neutral nod. All right, she thought. If the house intends to tell the truth, I will let it. She murmured something about checking the coach room and slipped away. The chandeliers faded behind her. The further she walked, the more honest the mansion became. Lights dimmed, voices thinned. The party's polished mask gave way to corridors that smelled of lemon oil and laundry steam. Here the walls held secrets. Perfume arrived first, smoky, expensive, the kind worn to announce carelessness. Deborah followed it past the deck door, past the crooked portrait from 2012, toward the guest corridor. Hushed laughter leaked from a door left slightly ajar. The faint clink of glass followed. Her pulse answered with a hard, steady drumbeat, a metronome for composure. She studied the evidence as if it were a ledger, a heel mark by the threshold where no guest should have walked. 2 coats tossed carelessly over a bench, one navy wool she knew, one cashmere she had never touched. A napkin pressed with lipstick in Lauren's color smashed into the fabric like a bruised flower. Deborah smoothed the napkin, folded it, then deliberately left it open again, a truce no one intended to honor. Inside, whispers tangled with laughter. Deborah set her palm against the wall to steady the tremor in her wrist. She thought of the years she had been told to be reasonable, to forgive quickly so others could sin faster. She thought of her money turned into props for someone else's lies. The door moved slightly under the pressure of air. She set 2 fingers against it, ready to open a view if she wished, ready, too, to retreat if she changed her mind. The piano, distant now, managed the right notes at last. A toast lifted. Time forked. In one version, she walked back to her car, telling herself the corridor was only a ghost, the message a misread. In the true version, she made herself a witness. She counted to 3 as she had as a child when she needed to change the day by changing her breath. On 2, she felt fear. On 3, she felt it sharpen into proof. She pressed. The gap widened a thin, bright inch. Perfume poured through like smoke seeking oxygen. She saw the edge of a fireplace screen, a hand resting on the mantel as if claiming property, a wineglass bleeding a wet circle on a coaster embroidered with the family crest. A shadow leaned toward another shadow. The room exhaled. Deborah set her jaw. If the house wanted to be a witness, she would let it. If the truth wanted a door, she would be the hand that opened it. The hinge gave a small, traitorous groan. The guest room opened like a stage, and the actors forgot their lines for one stunned heartbeat. Evan's hand rested on the mantel, his wedding band gleaming against the dark stone. Lauren leaned toward him, her mouth tilted upward, wine glossing the corner of her smile. The kiss wasn't clumsy or stolen. It was practiced, familiar. A rhythm rehearsed so many times their bodies no longer needed thought. Deborah didn't speak. The room spoke for her. The fire clicked as a log settled. The glass on the coaster bled a slow ring into linen. Perfume hung heavy, sweet as a lie told too often. Evan jerked back first, wiping his mouth like a teenager caught past curfew. Lauren did not flinch. She looked at Deborah the way someone looks at a mirror they've already decided to hate. Then almost gently, she smirked. "You weren't invited," Lauren said, as if etiquette, not adultery, were the injury. The words landed at Deborah's feet like broken glass. Evan scrambled for explanation. "It just happened," he stammered. "An accident, champagne, stress." Each syllable collapsed under its own weight. Deborah's gaze cataloged the evidence, precise as a ledger, the lipstick napkin on the bench, the text message on the sideboard, the glitter on Evan's cuff that wasn't hers. When a picture balances, you stop pretending it's coincidence. She stepped fully into the room. The angle changed. In the mantel mirror, she saw all three of them framed together. Her husband, her sister, herself at the doorway like an uninvited witness the story had not expected. She waited for rage. It did not come. What arrived was colder, sharper. A noticing, Lauren's bracelet, new, Evan's shoulders carrying the shrug of habitual lies, the faint relief in both of them that the secret was finally out in the air. "Enough," Deborah said, not because they had said much, but because there was nothing left to hear. She turned and walked back into the hallway. Perfume trailed behind her, then thinned as the party's noise swallowed her again. From the dining room doorway, she saw her mother staring into her wine as if the glass might tell the future. Her father tapped 2 fingers against his knee, the rhythm he used at basketball games when free throws mattered. Deborah circled the table, waiting for someone, anyone, to be brave enough to say her name. No one did. She set her hand lightly on the back of an empty chair. Her voice was steady. "How long?" Her mother's lip trembled, then straightened into the hard line of disappointment. Her father cleared his throat but never finished her name. Cousins pretended not to watch. The pianist struck a wrong note and covered it by playing louder. Lauren and Evan entered together, perfectly wrong. Lauren set a palm on Deborah's shoulder as if blessing her departure. Evan hovered, desperate to stack excuses into a tower made of nothing. "It meant nothing," he whispered. "It was heat of the moment. It was stress." Lauren added cruelty disguised as concern. "You work too much. You don't know how to have fun. You made it easy." The sentences slid past Deborah without landing. She remembered every late-night loan to Lauren, every conference Evan took in the same cities as her sister. She remembered her own rehearsed smile in the mirror, shaped to avoid offending anyone. The arithmetic wrote itself. She looked once more to her parents, offering them the chance to choose truth. Her father found her mother's hand under the table. Her mother gave the smallest nod, the family's signal for tolerate. The grief unclenched in her chest. She felt the tilt of the world, steady now, and understood. This betrayal was new, but their loyalties had never been hers. Deborah did not cry. She did not scream. She memorized Lauren's smirk. Evan's half-turned body, angling for escape. She made a photograph in her mind and slid it into a folder labeled not negotiable. Then she did the bravest, quietest thing she could inside a room built to break her. She refused to perform. She did not reach for a coat. She did not throw a glass. She simply straightened, withdrew her hand from the chair, and said, "Thank you, now I understand." Lauren laughed too brightly. Evan pleaded. Her mother whispered her name. Her father said nothing. The room pulled at her like gravity. She stepped sideways instead, and the pull released. By the sideboard, Evan's phone pulsed again, glowing like a metronome for bad decisions. She let it blink twice, then die. At the foyer threshold, she paused, listening to the chorus rising about joy and wonder and peace on earth. She let the words wash past. Here, joy had conditions. Wonder demanded blindness. Peace required her silence. She had paid enough. She would not pay again. She crossed the foyer without looking back. Outside, the cold air took her face in its hands. In that honesty, she made a simple decision. Tonight would not end with her broken. Tonight would end with a plan. Deborah re-entered the dining room as if nothing in the house could touch her anymore. The chandelier scattered light across polished wood and crystal. The pianist had found his rhythm again. Conversations rose in uneven waves, like a tide too cautious to claim the shore. She did not raise her voice. She did not clear her throat. She simply placed her phone on the linen beside an untouched dessert plate and pressed a single contact she had memorized long before she ever needed it. "Martin," she said when her advisor answered. "It's Deborah. Cancel every dollar tied to Lauren's boutique, effective immediately. Freeze all transfers, terminate auto draws, revoke my guarantees, send me confirmations before midnight." The room stilled. First confusion, then a hush rolled outward, crushing small talk about flights, schools, real estate. Lauren's laughter snapped in half. Evan froze mid-sip. Their parents looked up at last, horror rearranging their faces into masks. "Of course," Martin replied. "Do you want me to notify suppliers as well?" "Yes," Deborah said, "and flag any personal cards Evan has ever used with my accounts for audit." She saw Evan flinch before she heard his breath. She didn't look at him. She watched Lauren instead. For a flicker, calculation flashed across Lauren's face, panic running faster than anger. She reached for a version of herself that could talk Deborah down. The mask cracked before it settled. Panic is loud even when it whispers. "You can't," Lauren hissed. "Not tonight, not after everything I've built." "What you built," Deborah said softly, "was a siphon." Lauren lunged for the phone, but Deborah lifted it effortlessly away, her calm like glass. In that calm, Lauren saw herself, and she didn't like the reflection. Evan's hand gripped Lauren's arm, as if restraining a restless dog. "Deb," he whispered, "let's talk in private. You don't want to make a scene." Deborah smiled as if he had made a small, silly joke. "A scene? No, I want to make a decision." Into the phone she added, "Yes, Martin, terminate. I'll sign digitally." The call ended with a quiet click that felt louder than any shout. Lauren's face drained of color. "Do you understand what this does? Payroll, orders, the spring line, you'll ruin me." "You ruined yourself," Deborah answered. She did not blink. She did not soften. She let the words land where they were aimed. Their mother surged to her feet, her chair screeching against the floor. "Deborah, enough. This is family. You don't humiliate your sister at Christmas." Deborah turned slowly, granting her mother the respect of attention without obedience. "I didn't humiliate her. I stopped paying for her costume." Her father tried the old compromise. "Let's calm down. We'll talk numbers in the morning." "Numbers," Deborah said, "are what got us here." She let the silence weigh until everyone felt it. Evan leaned close, lowering his voice to an imitation of intimacy. "Please, don't do this. It meant nothing. It was a mistake. We were drunk." "Then you'll both be sober in the morning," Deborah said, "and still responsible." Lauren's hand flew to her throat as if a necklace had tightened. "Debbie," she pleaded, using a name she only chose when begging. "I'm sorry. I was under pressure. Retail is brutal. This isn't you. You're kind. You don't punish." Deborah thought of the lipstick napkin, text that said doors open, 10 minutes, the bracelet catching every chandelier's light. She thought of her mother's hand braced on the door like a guard, her father's knee tapping through her loneliness. "Merry Christmas," she said at last, to Lauren, to Evan, to the family that had chosen its lies. "This year I'm taking everything back." The silence was raw. Someone at the far end of the table excused themselves to check on the children. A cousin invented an errand in the kitchen. The pianist, sensitive as ever, shifted into a carol in a minor key. Lauren's anger returned, brittle and sharp. "You are spiteful, ungrateful, cruel, after all I've done for you." "For me?" Deborah repeated. You mean the years I made sure you didn't face your consequences? Their mother began to cry. Reflex swept the room, pleas, bargains, blame, all of it machinery that had always worked. Until now, Evan reached for her wrist, gentle in a way that had bought him too many reprieves. She stepped back. He caught only air. Don't touch me, she said. We're done doing this your way. She slid her phone into her pocket, lifted her scarf, and put on her coat without hurry. She did not look at the gifts abandoned in the foyer. Gifts were for celebrations. This was a boundary. At the door, she made her final inventory, Lauren choking on outrage she couldn't spend, Evan practicing remorse without repentance, her parents terrified of appearances. She closed the drawer on the scene. Outside, the cold night air lifted the heat from her skin like a benediction. Power arrived not as thunder, but as a switch flipped in a locked room. She hadn't won an argument. She had shut off a valve. She had cut the strings. Behind her, chaos bloomed through the walls, raised voices, footsteps, a door slamming, a phone that would not ring the way they hoped. Deborah started the car. The dashboard lit with ordinary light. She gripped the wheel, exhaled, and felt, for the first time in years, the shape of her life belonged to her again. The morning after Christmas, Deborah woke to a house that finally sounded like itself. No forced laughter, no rehearsed carols, only the quiet tick of radiators and the cry of a gull slicing the winter sky. She brewed coffee strong enough to taste. Then she opened her laptop and forwarded Martin every scrap she had. The boutique transfer schedules, screenshots of midnight pleas for bridge loans, even a photo of the lipstick-smeared napkin she could not forget. Martin replied with a single line that felt like steel. Come by at 10. Bring nothing but your memory. His office sat above a hardware store, blinds half closed, law books worn to the spine. He greeted her with a handshake that offered no pity. Then he slid a legal pad across the desk. Start with dates, he said. We'll earn the story with numbers. So she did. Wire by wire, forgiveness by forgiveness. Every indulgence she had disguised as generosity. Every boundary she had mislabeled as cruelty. Martin listened without interruption, then opened his laptop and began pulling threads. Merchant codes told the first truth. Paris hotels, private car service, a restaurant that required a membership just to see the menu, all matched perfectly with Evan's supposed conference trips. Same weekends, same card numbers, same vanishing act dressed as business. Invoices revealed the second truth. The boutique claimed consulting dinners. On nights, the store had closed for inventory. A deposit for vendor outreach. A travel agency coincided with Lauren's own Instagram post of a dawn view over the Seine. Receipts for handbags and jewelry hid inside the file structure like jokes that had lost their punchline. Martin flagged each entry, his pen moving like a scalpel. The third truth waited in documents meant to protect Deborah, a stapled packet titled Investment Agreement and Security Addendum. The signatures were hers, but the pages between had been replaced. The clauses now bound her money as collateral for market volatility. Lauren had whispered those words over the phone at midnight, begging for one more week, one more supplier. The scan Deborah had signed was not the scan they had kept. A notary seal sat crooked. Metadata betrayed the swap, showing edits made 2 days later on a different machine. Deborah steadied her hand against the desk. She forced herself to say it plainly. This isn't an affair that spilled into money. This is theft. Martin didn't smile, but his eyes sharpened. He opened a clean document and began a list she would memorize like scripture. Immediate steps. 1. Revoke guarantees, courier and email, both with read receipts. 2. Emergency freeze on boutique accounts citing suspected misrepresentation. 3. Audits on every card or vendor linked to her money. 4. Formal notice to Evan demanding accounting of marital expenses inconsistent with purpose. 5. Preservation letters to social platforms and phone carriers to retain message logs. 6. Draft complaint for restitution ready to file if they tried to hide assets. We do not threaten, Martin said. We prepare, speak only in facts, do not post, do not text, let the paper speak. Deborah repeated it like a vow. Let the paper speak. By afternoon, confirmations trickled in, auto draws terminated, supplier alerts sent. A payment processor flagged unusual midnight refunds, Lauren scrambling for runway where none existed. Martin forwarded the alert with a note, "They are panicking. Do not answer calls you can't record in memory." Evan tried first. His voicemail sounded like a rehearsal spliced over too many takes. "Deborah, call me. This is blown out of proportion. We can fix it." Lauren's email followed. Formal, faintly legal, framing Deborah as a sophisticated investor who understood risk. Martin highlighted a line and wrote a translation in the margin. "They're painting you as complicit." That night, Deborah spread the evidence across her kitchen table. Bank statements like tarot cards, receipts like broken prayers. She studied them until they rearranged into a truth she could name without flinching. This wasn't a love triangle. It was a balance sheet. Assets stolen on the back of trust. Liabilities hidden beneath affection. She remembered Lauren's words at the door, "No place for losers." The cruelty had been accidental truth. In their world, losers were anyone who trusted. Martin handed her a slim folder before she left. "This is the ledger that matters. Keep it close. Facts are armor." She stepped onto the sidewalk, dusk turning the street to blueprint. For the first time since the mansion, she felt the weight shift. Not humiliation, not rage. Something sharper, clarity. She no longer needed revenge to be loud. She needed it to be correct. And now she had the ledger. Lauren moved first. By morning, her post sat at the top of every cousin's feed, a long paragraph in her emergency tone, breathless, righteous, the word jealous repeated 3 times like a prayer. She painted herself as the self-made woman sabotaged by a bitter sister who never supported female entrepreneurship. She tagged Deborah directly. Comments poured in. Some relatives echoed her words, quick to throw stones. Others who barely remembered Deborah chimed in, stingy, bitter, a failure in business and love, a Grinch who ruined Christmas. Screenshots lit Deborah's phone one after another. She did not answer. She brewed coffee, opened the folder Martin had given her, and scanned 6 pages into a clean PDF. No commentary, no arrows, no circles. Just facts, dates, totals, merchant codes. She forwarded it to Martin. Subject line, use what we need. By noon, the documents began their quiet journey. A supplier received proof that Lauren's critical inventory conference matched hotel charges in Paris. Another supplier saw dinner receipts for 2, aligned with Evan's supposed business trip. A boutique staff group chat, already brittle with suspicion, found screenshots of refunds processed at odd hours to prop up payroll. The numbers traveled faster than gossip. And unlike gossip, they required no adjectives. Family friends who had rushed to defend Lauren found private messages waiting in their inboxes. A single forged agreement, the notary seal crooked, metadata dates off by days. A former employee leaked a voice note of Lauren bragging that branding is 90% story, and that the fastest way to a story was borrowing belief from a sister who never says no. Her voice was bright, careless. Gravity didn't seem to apply. By evening, the first withdrawals began. A cousin quietly untagged himself from Lauren's post. An aunt texted Deborah an apology wrapped in passive verbs, were misled, wasn't aware. A vendor issued a bland statement, "We take allegations seriously," then stopped answering Lauren's calls. The boutique's Instagram went quiet, then defensive, then quiet again. Evan's fall came from another direction. A colleague forwarded Deborah an internal memo, expenses inconsistent with purpose. A compliance had flagged his travel reimbursements. No adjectives, just corporate language that sliced clean. Deborah pictured Evan reading the email, recognizing the tone, and knowing the warmth that had once shielded him had cooled into procedure. She did not smile. She had lived too long under consequences that arrived late. Within a week, employees left the boutique in waves. Each departure dressed in polite captions, new opportunities, prioritizing integrity. A local blog ran a piece titled "The Newport Glam That Wasn't," quoting anonymous sources about unpaid vendors and broken promises. Everyone who knew the family knew exactly whose boutique it was. Lauren tried another post, this time more lawyerly, hinting at defamation, orchestrated harassment. She attached nothing. The algorithm did the rest. It buried her. Deborah did not chase the noise. She kept her phone on Do Not Disturb, checking messages at noon and 6, the way you check a cast for cracks. When Martin wrote, it was only confirmation. The freeze order acknowledged, preservation letters received, processors tightening control. He sent her one line, "We are not winning a fight. We are closing a file." One evening, Gail came by with soup. They sat at the same table where Deborah had once spread bank statements like tarot cards. "Does it help?" Gail asked, nodding toward the folder of receipts, the inbox of anonymous thank yous. "Not the way you think," Deborah said. "It doesn't fix what they broke. It just makes the room honest." The honesty spread. A reporter reached out, careful but direct, asking about Lauren's finances and Evan's travel. Deborah forwarded it to Martin. His reply came fast, no quotes, no color. "If they print, let them print what we can authenticate." The article ran a week later. Headline, cautious, padded with the word alleged. But it included screenshots with dates and totals. The quiet phrase, "documents reviewed by our newsroom." No drama needed. The numbers did the work. Evan left voicemails, softer each time, his voice shrinking into silence. Lauren switched to voice notes, swinging between apology and accusation until her tone blurred. Deborah archived them all. She wasn't erasing history. She was refusing performance. The public fall looked like spectacle to outsiders. But to Deborah it was arithmetic, one more equation balancing at last. On a Saturday, she passed the boutique, windows still dressed with last season's hope. A handwritten sign read "closed for inventory." Deborah knew the code. It meant collapse. She saw her reflection ghosted in the glass and felt nothing volcanic, only clarity. The liars were unmasked. The world had shifted its gaze. She didn't need applause. She had the receipts, and the receipts had her. The courtroom held no chandeliers, no carols, no corners to hide. Fluorescent lights hummed like an irritated bee. The clock over the judge's bench chopped time into blunt segments. Deborah sat beside Martin at counsel table, the slim folder resting in front of her, the same one he had told her to guard. Across the aisle, Lauren adjusted a blazer that wanted to look like power but didn't. Evan practiced a smile that had once opened doors. The clerk called their names. Oaths were taken. The judge, a woman with winter gray hair and a voice like iron, looked at them as if she had met their kind 100 times before. "We're here on motions for financial preservation and preliminary relief," she said. "I've read your filings. Let's keep this efficient." Efficiency was Martin's weather. He stood, his words stripped of adjectives, and laid out the map. Transfers from Deborah's accounts to Lauren's boutique. Merchant codes for Paris hotels aligned with Evan's conferences. Refunds processed at 2:13 a.m. Investment agreements swapped and sealed with a notary stamp that faltered under magnification. Exhibit after exhibit passed into the judge's hands in the order that made a mind say yes. She did not nod, but she followed. Lauren's counsel tried narrative, seasonal stress, women supporting women, jealous sisters. The judge raised a hand. "Show me documents. I don't adjudicate vibes." When none arrived, the air turned colder. Then Lauren asked to speak. Her lawyer paled, but the judge allowed 3 minutes. Lauren rose, her voice soft as a late-night call. "Give me a seat at your table again," she said to Deborah, not the bench. "I'll do anything." The words floated perfume with no place to land. The court reporter did not lift her head. Evan followed with reason, his posture contrite, his voice low. "It was a mistake. We were drunk. We wanted to feel young." The judge's pen tapped against her pad. "A young feeling cannot alter a ledger," she said. Martin didn't ask Deborah if she wanted to respond. They had agreed no speeches. Let the paper speak. He slid restitution terms across the aisle. Arithmetic only, sums to be repaid, clauses to block future guarantees. A separation agreement for Evan, demanding sworn accounting of every marital expense, inconsistent with purpose. The counsel huddled, whispered. Lauren tried outrage, then sobriety, then a childlike plea. Evan asked for softened lines, blurred numbers. Martin's answer was simple. No, the judge called recess. In the hallway, linoleum carried the echo of griefs long past. Lauren approached without her lawyer. "Deborah," she whispered, reaching for a hand that did not rise. "You know me, I'm not a bad person. The boutique is all I have." "You had me," Deborah said. "It was an accusation. It was a closing of the file." Evan tried next, eyes softened with practiced regret. "We could fix it. Counseling. No more trips. I'll." Deborah tilted her head, listening the way one does when a smoke detector chirps in a house not on fire. "You taught me what you are willing to be," she said. "I am unwilling now." Back inside, signatures crawled across paper. Lauren's hand shook at the forged page's clause. Evan hesitated at the audit line. The judge stamped the orders with a dull thud. "You will comply," she told them, her voice without question marks. It ended without applause. The court was already moving to the next case when Deborah rose, gathered her folder, and walked out. In the corridor, Martin pressed the elevator button. He gave her space to speak. She didn't. Some victories belong to silence. Months folded over ruins and turned them into landscape. Deborah worked, slept, laughed. She painted a canvas blue, then bluer. She ran along the cliff walk when the wind allowed, stood still when it didn't. The scandals softened into local lore, told by people who preferred their drama secondhand. The boutique never reopened. Evan moved into a small apartment. Lauren launched an online venture that never took air. One evening, the ocean turned gold. Deborah walked the cliffs until light thinned to silver. She didn't feel triumphant. Triumph is loud. She felt free. Freedom is quiet. A coat that finally fits without apology for warmth. She thought of the mansion door, of Lauren's words, "No place for losers." Cruelty had mislabeled her. She smiled, small and private. There was never a place for liars either, and she had stopped setting their table. That is, caught cheating at Christmas, I took everything back. No applause, no grand speech, just signatures, restitution, and a life that finally fits. Betrayal always sends a bill, and facts are the currency that gets it paid. What part hit you hardest? The door, the text, or the judge's stamp? If you were Deborah, what would you have done differently? If this story resonated like the video, subscribe to Cheating Stories 7 and share your thoughts below. Your comments help us choose the next story, and your voice keeps this community honest. See you in the next one.